early morning in the spring of 2016. The air was cold at the Pine Hills graveyard in Chicago. The clock hit 6:15 a.m. as Maeve stepped out of a dark car. She was 90 years old, her body worn down by time and a weak heart. For 5 decades, she had kept a heavy secret locked inside her. She was here to see the grave of her husband, Bumpy Johnson. He passed away in 1968 and was given a massive funeral that people still talked about. Everyone thought he was resting in peace, but Maeve had started to doubt everything. That worry led her to sign the legal papers hidden in her jacket. She had permission to do this privately. No reporters or relatives were invited, just the cemetery staff and a funeral expert. They were about to open a casket that had been underground for 50 years. Maeve wasn't doing this to remember the good times. She was doing it because she was terrified. The fear started 20 days ago. A stranger had come to her home in the city. He looked sharp and spoke with a calm voice that made her skin crawl. He didn't say hello. Instead, he told her she had buried the wrong person. When she tried to shut the door, he stopped her and whispered something chilling. He claimed the man she loved died in pain and that the body in the dirt was a fake. Now, at the graveyard, the heavy gates opened. The workers looked at Maeve with curiosity. They knew her husband's famous name, but they didn't know why a widow would want to dig him up after all this time. As the box was pulled from the earth, it looked solid and untouched. This should have made her feel better, but it made her more nervous. Maeve remembered the night Bumpy Johnson died. She never actually saw him. The doctors and the undertakers told her his face was in bad shape after he collapsed at a diner. They insisted on a closed casket. She had spent 50 years living with that silence. The worker pried the lid open. A foul, dusty scent filled the air. Maeve walked to the edge and looked inside. The man was wearing Bumpy's clothes, but it wasn't him. The chin was too small, and the nose had never been broken. Most importantly, the hands were soft. Bumpy's hands were covered in scars from years of fighting. These hands were perfect. Maeve's legs gave out, and she fell onto the damp ground. Her heart raced as she realized the truth. If her husband wasn't in this box, where was he? Who had gone to such trouble to trick her? The mystery was still a threat, even half a century later. The stranger who warned her was named Silas Vance, though she wouldn't learn his name until much later, after the world she knew had fallen apart. Silas was 56 years old and worked as a head janitor at a large hospital in downtown Chicago. He was a lonely man. His wife had left him, and his sons moved away years ago. His only joy was his daughter, Elena. She was 32 and desperately needed a new liver to survive. Silas was drowning in medical bills, and the waiting list for an organ transplant was far too long. He had already spent his life savings trying to save her. Desperation led Silas to a smoky cafe, where a mysterious man offered him a deal he couldn't pass up. The man pushed a thick envelope across the table, containing $20,000 in cash. It wasn't a gift, it was a payment for a job. The man told Silas to visit Maeve and convince her to stop looking into her husband's death. Silas knew who Bumpy Johnson was. Everyone in the city knew the stories of the legendary man. Silas didn't want to get involved with such dangerous history, but the money could buy Elena the time she needed to find a donor. He took the cash and went to Maeve's apartment. He tried to frighten her, telling her that digging up the past would only lead to trouble. Maeve had looked him in the eye and asked if he knew what her husband's hands looked like. Silas froze. He remembered a night years ago when he had been asked to clean a hidden basement in an old medical building. There, he had seen a body wrapped in heavy plastic. He hadn't known who it was at the time, but he vividly remembered the man's hands. They were covered in old scars and looked like they had been through 1,000 battles. Now, standing at the cemetery, watching Maeve fall to the ground in shock, Silas realized he was in over his head. The body in the casket was definitely a fake. Someone powerful had switched the remains 50 years ago and was still protecting that secret today. As the paramedics rushed Maeve to the hospital, Silas followed. He was trapped. The man from the cafe was calling his phone repeatedly, and Silas knew those calls were threats. He stood in the sterile hospital room, watching Maeve rest against the white sheets. She looked frail, but her mind was still as sharp as a blade. "You've seen him," Maeve whispered, her eyes locking onto his. Silas tried to play dumb, claiming he was just trying to protect her. Maeve didn't believe him for a second. She told him she had spent her whole life around liars and knew he was hiding the truth. Silas realized he had a terrible choice to make: take the blood money to save his daughter, or help an old woman find the truth about Bumpy Johnson and risk everything. "That isn't the same," Maeve whispered. She shifted in her bed, a flash of pain making her look every bit of her 90 years. "Tell me who is giving you orders, then I will decide if I should be scared." Silas' phone vibrated in his pocket again, caller unknown. He hit the silent button. "My girl is dying," he confessed, the truth pouring out of him. "She is very ill and I'm broke. They offered me a way out." Maeve nodded slowly, her expression soft. "Cash always comes with a leash. What were your orders?" "To ensure that casket stayed in the ground," Silas replied. The room went quiet. Maeve closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a steady gaze. "I knew," she said. "The day they put him in the dirt, I knew something was wrong." Silas was confused. "Then why did you wait 5 decades?" "Because being afraid lasts longer than being sad," she answered. "And because someone finally slipped up." She pulled a yellowed piece of paper from her nightstand. It was a hospital record from 1968. "I found this hidden in a box. It's a transfer form. My husband was moved out of the local clinic 2 hours before the doctors said he died." Silas felt dizzy. "Moved where?" "The destination is blank," she said. A sudden knock at the door cut her off. 2 men in sharp suits walked in. They had security badges, but their eyes were cold. One looked at Silas. "We need to talk to you." Maeve watched them like a hawk. "About what?" The men ignored her. In the hallway, one of them cornered Silas. "You've gone too far. You were paid to shut her down, not help her." "I didn't open that box," Silas argued. "But you didn't prevent it." The man snapped. The other man leaned in. "You have a daughter, Elena. She needs her treatments on schedule. It would be a shame if things got complicated." Silas felt sick. "What do you want?" "We want the old woman to go home, and we want you to remember who holds the power," the man said. They turned and walked away. Silas went back into the room, shaking. Maeve didn't need to ask. "They're terrified," she said. "That means we are close." "Close to what?" Silas hissed. "Getting buried ourselves? Close to finding out who decided Bumpy Johnson wasn't allowed to die," she said. Silas laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You think he lived?" "I think they kept him as a tool," she replied. "And when they were done with him, they erased him." Silas's phone buzzed with a text. "Last warning. Leave now." He looked at the dying woman, then at the hospital files. He was trapped. But a bigger question was haunting him. If Bumpy didn't die at that diner, who owned him for all those years? The lead they followed was an old warehouse in Queens, scheduled for destruction. Maeve had received a tip in the mail, a city notice about a condemned building with a specific floor circled. Basement medical storage. It took 3 days to arrange a visit. Silas used a connection with an old work friend to get a key for 15 minutes. The building was a wreck, covered in vines and boarded up. It looked like a ghost house. Inside, the air was freezing and smelled of dust. They walked down a long concrete staircase that went deep underground. Silas checked his phone. There was no signal. "Of course," he grumbled. "Dead zone." They reached the lowest level. The room was a graveyard of rusted medical tools and empty cabinets. This wasn't a storage unit. It was a tomb. Maeve stopped dead in her tracks. "Right there," she pointed. A shape wrapped in thick plastic sat against the wall. Silas felt his heart drop into his stomach. As they got closer, the plastic crunched like old parchment. When Silas pulled a corner back, the scent of age and chemicals filled his lungs. This wasn't a dummy. This was Bumpy Johnson. He looked older than in the photos. His hair turned to silver at the sides, but there was no mistaking him. He had lived far longer than the history books claimed. Maeve dropped to her knees. Her fingers brushed his face, lingering on his mouth, which had been sewn shut with messy, hurried stitches. Silas stepped back, gasping. They didn't kill him back then, he realized. They kidnapped him. Yes, Maeve whispered, because a dead man is silent, but a living legend can be made to talk. Before Silas could ask what Bumpy knew, the lights cut out. Heavy boots thudded on the stairs. Lots of them. A bright beam of light sliced through the dark. "Mrs. Johnson," a voice called out. It was the man from the cafe. "You really should have stayed home." Silas turned, his pulse thundering. "You said he died." "I said he died screaming," the man replied coldly. "I just never told you the date." Two thugs stood behind him. One leveled a pistol at them. The other held a thick, bursting file folder. This place was meant to stay a secret. Now that you've seen it, we have to clean up the mess. Maeve stood up slowly. "You used him. You kept him caged because he knew the names of every dirty politician and cop in this city." The man gave a thin, cruel smile. He was helpful for a while. Then he stopped talking. "Why the fake funeral?" Silas asked, his voice shaking. "Because legends need to stay in the past," the man said, raising his weapon. "Living men are too much trouble." Silas didn't think, he just acted. He dived, not at the gun, but at the file folder. Papers flew everywhere. Photos, signed deals, and lists of rats and spies dating back decades. Names of people who were still powerful today. A shot rang out, but Maeve had slammed her heavy flashlight into the shooter's arm. The gun hit the floor. Chaos broke out. Silas scrambled for the papers while the men tried to tackle him. He was slammed into the concrete. The wind knocked out of him. A second shot echoed, then a sudden, eerie silence. When the emergency lights flickered on, two of the attackers were down, and the leader had vanished. Sirens began to wail nearby. Silas stood up, clutching the folder. Maeve was looking at Bumpy's body, her face set like stone. "They didn't just take my husband," she said. "They stole 50 years of the truth. If people see these names," Silas warned, "the city will burn." "Let it burn," she replied. As the police closed in, Silas made a choice. He handed her the files. "I'll slow them down. You get out of here." "What about Elena?" she asked. Silas looked at the evidence. "This is her only chance." Maeve squeezed his hand and disappeared into the shadows. When the police rounded the corner, Silas surrendered. He realized then that they hadn't been hiding a corpse. They had been hiding a massive liability. 3 days later, the news reported a structural collapse in the basement. They claimed no bodies were found. Silas sat in the hospital, his arm in a sling, after being grilled by investigators for 24 hours. They let him go without charges, which felt like a death sentence. In the middle of the night, Silas's phone buzzed. "Check your inbox." The email was full of the scanned files, bank records, secret deals, and names of high-ranking officials. At the bottom was a note. "This is your shield. Use it wisely." Silas knew if he went to the news, he'd be killed. But if he did nothing, Elena would die. At sunrise, he made a call, not to a reporter, but to a powerful doctor in the capital who had a lot to lose if those files went public. By noon, Elena was at the top of the transplant list. Across town, Maeve packed a single bag. She left her home forever, leaving no note. When thugs broke into her apartment 2 days later, they found only a message carved into her table. "It's already over." She had sent the files to 3 rival powerful figures. By the end of the month, the city was rocked by sudden retirements and resignations. No one explained why. Silas watched his daughter recover from surgery. He had saved her, but the price was heavy. Somewhere, a legend had been buried twice, once in a fake grave and once in a sea of lies. The silence in the city had finally cracked, and the ghosts were starting to speak. An old investigator packed his bags for Florida, selling his home for much less than it was worth, just to get away. In the city, a man who once claimed to be the king of secrets suddenly stopped answering his door. No one spoke the name Bumpy Johnson out loud. They didn't need to. The terror wasn't about the things he had done in the past. It was about the secrets he had taken to his hidden grave. Silas felt the world changing around him. Suddenly, private guards appeared in the hospital hallways. They weren't there for the public. They were there for him. Elena's surgery was a success, but her room was guarded like a prison cell. "You've poked a hornet's nest," her doctor whispered one evening. "I didn't poke it," Silas said. "I just turned on the lights." At night, Silas' mind raced. He saw those folders in his dreams, the ink turning into blood. Maeve was gone by then. She didn't leave a trail, just one final message on his phone after Elena woke up from surgery. "I've done my part," her voice crackled. "Now you have to live with the consequences." As the months rolled by, there were no big explosions in the news. Instead, the damage was quiet and precise. High-ranking officials lost their jobs for personal reasons. Wealthy men lost their savings. Secret court cases happened behind locked doors. It wasn't a public spectacle. It was a slow, terrifying cleanup. Silas went back to his job, but his new boss wouldn't even look at him. Elena grew stronger every day, finally healthy and full of life. But the cost was high. Silas' friends stopped calling. His neighbors turned their heads when he walked by. Someone painted rat on his car, then tried to wash it off, as if they were too scared even to insult him. The city knew he was the man who held the matches, and they didn't want to get burned. Far away, in a quiet town where no one knew her, Maeve watched the world on a silent television. She tracked every name and every fall from grace. She didn't feel happy or relaxed. She knew this wasn't the end. It was just a shift in power. The heavy burden her husband had carried for 50 years was now resting on the shoulders of the men who had tried to erase him. The very last thing Maeve did wasn't about getting even. Half a year after they opened that casket, a secret document was filed in a dark office in the nation's capital. It didn't have her name on it. It was just one sentence that changed everything. It revealed that Bumpy Johnson had helped the government once, but then he stopped. He refused to talk because they wanted him to betray a woman who had handled money for men who were still in power. Maeve didn't name the woman. She didn't have to. The date on the paper was enough to ruin a powerful person's career overnight. A major political appointment was canceled, and the person involved never even understood why. Silas heard the rumors much later while sitting in a park with Elena. Seeing her smile without any pain made him feel a sense of peace, but also a deep sadness. The truth hadn't really set anyone free. It had just been used as a weapon to buy safety for the people who deserved a second chance. Bumpy Johnson never returned, and his real story remained buried in the shadows. But for those who knew the truth, the silence was finally over. He never found peace or justice. Instead, his memory was used as a tool one last time. Perhaps that was the saddest part of the entire ordeal. The man who had outlasted prison cells, wars, and attempts to wipe him from history wasn't honored for his life. Instead, his value was measured by how much his silence could buy after he was gone. If you enjoy tales where the deepest truths of the past are hidden in the dark, make sure to follow us for more. Some tombs remain sealed, not because there is nothing inside, but because revealing the truth decides who survives and who falls.